Exactly what my stepmother said as she dropped my father's vinyl records, one by one, onto the marble kitchen floor. She held the Miles Davis kind of blue first pressing, the one Dad played the night I graduated, between two manicured fingers like it was a soiled napkin. Then she let it go. The sound it made when it cracked was the same sound my heart made. She laughed. Actually laughed. Like watching 40 years of someone's soul shatter was a wine-tasting party trick. But she didn't know what was inside the sleeve of that record. She didn't know my father had spent the last 6 months of his life sliding something between the cardboard and the inner liner. Something that would put her in a federal courtroom by spring. Before I tell you how I let her destroy herself, do me a favor, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. Atlanta, Phoenix, somewhere quieter? I want to know who's sitting with me through this one. To understand why I didn't scream when she dropped that record, you have to go back about an hour earlier. It was the day after Dad's funeral. The house in Sausalito still smelled like the white lilies the funeral director had insisted on. Dad would have hated those. He was a gardenia man. And there was a half-eaten quiche from the neighbors sweating on the counter. I was wiping down the kitchen island for the third time because nobody else was going to do it. My stepmother, Marguerite, had spent the morning on the phone with her interior designer about modernizing the living room. The body wasn't cold and she was already picking out throw pillows. I walked into the den where Dad kept his collection. 2,000 records, alphabetized by genre and then by artist, in custom oak shelving he built himself in 1987. He used to say that room had better acoustics than Capitol Studios. I just wanted to sit there for a few minutes. Just sit. Maybe put on the Coltrane. That's when I heard her heels in the hallway. Marguerite swept in wearing a black silk robe at 11 in the morning, followed by her son Drew. Drew is technically my stepbrother, though calling him that gives him too much credit. He's 36, lives in a condo Dad paid for, and works as a consultant for a vape company in Oakland. He had a glass of my father's good bourbon in his hand. 11 a.m. "Oh, goods, you're already in here," Marguerite said. "Saves me a trip." She walked over to the shelves and ran a single fingernail down the spines. Pearl pink polish, the same color she'd worn to the burial. "Drew, get the recycling bin from the garage, the big blue one." I stood up. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done 10 years ago," she said. "This room is going to be my meditation studio. I've already told the designer. We need light in here, cream walls, floating shelves for crystals. Marguerite, these are Dad's records. They're noise, sweetheart. They're literally noise on plastic." She pulled out a Bill Evans LP, Sunday at the Village Vanguard, an original Riverside pressing, and held it up to the light like it was a piece of evidence. "Do you know what these are worth, used?" "Nothing. The Salvation Army doesn't even take them anymore." "Drew, the bin." Drew set his bourbon down on top of a Thelonious Monk and went to fetch the recycling. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Some of these are first pressings. The Miles Davis alone is worth. She turned and smiled at me, and that's when I saw it. The greed. The hunger. The thing I've been pretending wasn't there for the last 6 years. "Sweetheart, if they were worth anything, your father would have sold them and taken me to Capri." "He didn't because they're not. They're old man garbage. It's time." Drew came back dragging the blue bin behind him. Marguerite reached for the Miles Davis. "I'd given Dad that record for Father's Day when I was 19. I'd worked double shifts at a coffee shop in Berkeley for 2 months to afford it." She held it up, looked me dead in the eye, and dropped it. The crack was so clean it sounded like a gunshot. "Whoops," Drew said and snickered in his glass. She didn't stop there. She pulled out the Coltrane, a Love Supreme, and dropped that one too. Then the Sonny Rollins, then the Mingus. Every drop was a percussion hit. Every crack was a piece of the man who taught me to drive, who took me to my first Giants game, who held me for 3 hours when I came home from college after my first real breakup. She wasn't cleaning. She was performing. Drew picked up a Dave Brubeck and frisbeed it across the room. It hit the bookshelf and split. "Oh, my hands," he said. "So slippery. They didn't even look at me. I wasn't a person to them. I was a piece of furniture. They were politely doing this around. I had been a piece of furniture for 6 years. Ever since Marguerite moved in with her real estate license and her Pilates body and her ability to make my father laugh again. 3 years after my mother died of pancreatic cancer. I stood there with my fists balled so tight my fingernails cut crescents into my palms, and I made a decision. I was not going to scream. I was not going to grab the records and run. Because if I did, here's what would happen. Marguerite would call her lawyer. She'd say I was emotionally unstable, that I'd attacked her, that I was contesting Dad's estate out of pure spite. We'd end up in probate court for the next 4 years. She had the money. She had Dad's money, actually. She'd bleed me out in legal fees until I gave up? No. I needed something more permanent than a will reading. I needed her to commit a crime. I walked out of the den. I didn't say a word. I went into the kitchen. I picked up the half-eaten quiche. I scraped it into the trash, and I washed the plate. My hands were shaking, but my face was a mask. About 40 minutes later, when they'd moved upstairs to start redoing Dad's office, I went back into the den. I knelt down by the bin. I dug through the broken shards of vinyl, and at the bottom I found the Miles Davis sleeve, the cardboard one separated from the cracked disc. I felt the inner liner. There's something inside it, something papery and folded. Dad's voice from 6 months earlier came back to me in the hospital when the morphine was making him drift, but his eyes were still sharp. He grabbed my wrist and said, "Maeve, listen. If anything happens, the music is the map. Start with Kind of Blue. Always start with Kind of Blue." I thought he was hallucinating. I slid the paper out. It was an envelope. Inside the envelope was a folded document, notarized, with a gold seal in the corner. The last will and testament of Howard Sullivan, the real one, dated 4 months before he died. Not the one Marguerite's attorney had been waving around for the last week. The one she'd shown me named her as sole executor and primary beneficiary, with a small trust for me that wouldn't unlock until I was 45. This one, the one in my hand, left the house, the music catalog, and 70% of his liquid assets to me. Marguerite got the Lexus and a clean exit. There was a clause near the bottom, hand-initialed, that read, "Any party found to have presented a forged or altered will is to be disinherited entirely, and my daughter Maeve is to pursue criminal charges to the full extent of the law." He knew. He knew what she was. I sat on the floor of that den with my father's broken music around me, and I read that document 4 times. And I understood something my grandfather used to say when we played gin rummy on the porch. Don't slap the cheater's hand. Let him deal another round. Let him deal until the whole table sees. I folded the will. I slid it into the inner pocket of my jean jacket. I walked out to my car, drove 3 blocks to a UPS store, and I made 4 copies. I overnighted one to my father's old college roommate, a retired federal judge in Sacramento. I put one in a safety deposit box at a credit union on Bridgeway. I emailed the scanned copy to a private attorney I'd been quietly consulting with for the last 2 months. A woman named Honora Briggs out of Oakland, who had handled my mother's estate when Dad was too grief-stricken to do it himself. And the original, I tucked back inside the Miles Davis sleeve and slid it behind a row of cookbooks in the kitchen pantry. Because the safest place to hide something is where the people looking for it would never bother to look. Then I made dinner. Salmon. Marguerite's favorite. I served it to her with a smile. 2.5 weeks went by. I cleaned. I cooked. I did her laundry without being asked. I called her Marguerite Honey in front of her friends. I became so quiet and so useful she stopped seeing me at all. Which was the whole point. Here's what I learned in those 2.5 weeks, mostly by leaving doors cracked and pretending not to listen. Marguerite was broke. Not just spending too much broke. Actually, technically criminally broke. She'd been borrowing against an investment account my father didn't know existed, using forged signatures for about 3 years. She owed somewhere north of $400,000 to a private credit fund out of Las Vegas, the kind that doesn't send strongly worded letters, they send men. Her plan had been to sell the Sausalito house, appraised at $3.2 million, pay off the debt, take the rest, and disappear to Lisbon with a personal trainer named Anders. Drew was supposed to get a finder's fee for keeping me quiet during the sale. The problem was the title. Probate had flagged it. The house was in a complicated trust my father had set up after Mom died, and the actual transfer of ownership was going to take 6 to 9 months minimum. Marguerite did not have 6 to 9 months. The Vegas people wanted payment by the end of February. I heard Drew suggest a creative solution over dinner one Tuesday. I was clearing plates. He didn't even lower his voice. You don't sell, he said. You borrow against the equity. Hard money lender, the kind that doesn't ask too many questions. They'll wire you the cash in 72 hours. You use the house as collateral. By the time anyone figures out the title's not clean, you're on a beach in Portugal. Is that legal? Marguerite asked. Drew laughed. Define legal. She didn't laugh back. She was thinking. I could see it. The math was happening behind her eyes. I dropped a fork on purpose, bent to pick it up, and stayed bent a little longer than necessary. Find me someone, she said. But it has to be fast, and it has to be no questions. I know a guy in Reno. That night, I locked my bedroom door, sat on the edge of my bed, and called Honora Briggs. They're going to do it, I whispered. She's going to take out a private loan against the house. Hard money. She's going to sign documents claiming sole ownership. There was a long pause on Honora's end. Maeve, you understand what that is, right? That's not just a family dispute. That's bank fraud, that's wire fraud, that's identity fraud against the trust. And if she takes a loan from out of state, that's federal. I understand. You're sure you want to let her do this? You can stop her right now. You can show her the real will tomorrow morning, and she walks away with a broken pride and the Lexus, like your father wanted. I looked at the framed photo on my dresser. Dad and me, 1998, at a Stan Getz tribute show in San Francisco. He had his hand on my shoulder. I was 8. He was the only adult in my life who ever made me feel like I took up exactly the right amount of space. She didn't just steal from him, I said. She danced on his memory while he was still warm. She made my brother throw vinyl across the room like it was Frisbee night. I'm not going to let her keep the Lexus. I want her to lose everything she ever pretended she earned. Honora was quiet for a second. Then she said, okay, then we let her sign. But Maeve, the moment that document is notarized and the wire goes through, I'm calling my contact at the FBI's San Francisco field office. White collar division. After that, it's out of our hands. Good, I said. Make the call. The signing was scheduled for a Friday morning, February 14th, Valentine's Day, which I thought was a little on the nose, but the universe is petty like that sometimes. The lender flew in from Nevada. His name was Cal. Something. I never caught the last name. Didn't matter. He was small time. A guy who wore a too shiny suit and a pinky ring and called Marguerite ma'am, like he was auditioning for a part. He brought a mobile notary with him. A woman in her 50s, with a kind face who I felt genuinely sorry for, because she had no idea what she was about to stamp her name on. They set up in Dad's old office, the mahogany desk where he used to write thank you notes by hand for every gift his clients sent him, even the bad ones. They spread out the loan documents, $600,000 at 22% interest, collateralized against the Sausalito house, promissory note, deed of trust, affidavit of sole ownership. I came in with the tray. Coffee, cream, the good shortbread cookies from the bakery on Caledonia Street. Marguerite didn't look up. Drew nodded at me without seeing me. So once I sign, Marguerite said, the wire goes through immediately? Within the hour, ma'am? Cal said. 600,000, direct deposit, no holds. And the interest? Don't worry about the interest, Drew interrupted, his hand on her shoulder. The house sells in 6 months. We pay it off out of escrow. We're golden. Cal cleared his throat. Just need you to initial here, here, and here, and then sign the affidavit confirming you are the sole legal owner of the property. She picked up the pen. I was pouring her coffee. Slowly. I needed to see her hand move. She didn't hesitate. Not even a half-second pause. She signed Marguerite Sullivan in a looping, confident cursive, and then she initialed the affidavit. Sole owner. She knew it was a lie. She didn't care. The notary stamped it. The stamp made a soft thump against the wood of my father's desk, and I felt that thump in my teeth. Cal opened his laptop, typed for about 30 seconds, and then his phone chimed. Wires released, he said. You'll see it in your account in 4 to 6 minutes. Marguerite squealed. Actually squealed. She threw her arms around Drew's neck and they did a little victory shimmy right there at Dad's desk, And Drew said, "Lisbon, baby. Lisbon." I set down the coffee tray. I reached into my apron pocket. There was a phone in there. The call had been live for the last 7 minutes. I pressed unmute. "Honora," I said softly. She signed. "The wire just released." I heard everything Honora said. "They're already in the driveway. Get out of the room, Maeve. Get out of the room, Maeve. Now." I stepped back. Marguerite turned, finally noticing me, and her face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, annoyance, and then something colder when she saw my phone. "What are you doing?" she said. "Marguerite?" I said, and for the first time in 6 years, I didn't call her honey. "I'd like you to meet some people." The doorbell didn't ring. It never does in moments like this. The front door opened because Honora had a key. She'd had a key for 2 months, and 4 federal agents in dark windbreakers came down the hallway with that specific, controlled urgency that only comes from people who do this for a living. 2 of them stopped in the office doorway. 2 of them came in. Marguerite Sullivan, the lead agent, said, "And Drew Pellman. Step away from the desk, please. Hands where we can see them." The notary stood up so fast her chair fell over. "What is this?" Marguerite shrieked. "What are you doing in my house?" "Get out of my house." "Ma'am, it's not your house," the agent said almost gently. "And we have probable cause to believe you just committed federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity fraud against the estate of Howard Sullivan." Cal, the lender, had gone the exact color of skim milk. He grabbed his briefcase. I had no... She told me she was the sole... "Sir, sit down," the second agent said. I walked over to the pantry. I reached behind the cookbooks. I pulled out the Miles Davis sleeve, slid the will out of the inner liner, and walked back to the office. I handed it to the lead agent. "This is my father's actual will," I said. "Notarized September 4th. Filed with the San Francisco probate court the day after he died. The will Mrs. Sullivan presented to the family last week was forged." The agent scanned it. He looked at Marguerite. She had gone very, very still. "You little," she said. "The truth doesn't care how patient you make it wait," I said. "It just shows up when it's ready." They cuffed her right there in front of Dad's desk. Drew didn't even fight. He just sat down on the floor and put his head in his hands and said, "I told you to wait. I told you to wait 6 more months." Cal got cuffed too. Turned out his private lending operation had been on the FBI's radar for about a year, and the Sausalito wire was the smoking gun they needed. I watched them lead Marguerite out the front door, in pearl pink polish and a cashmere coat, ducking her head into the back of an unmarked SUV. It was over. That's what I thought. I forgot one thing. Snakes don't travel alone. I'd been standing in the foyer maybe 90 seconds, watching the agents inventory the office, when Drew slowly stood up off the floor. He brushed off his pants. He pulled something out of the inside of his blazer very calmly and held it up to the lead agent. "Before you take me anywhere," he said, "you might want to look at this." The agent took it, frowned. "It's an emergency conservatorship order," Drew said. "Signed yesterday afternoon by a judge in Marin County. My sister Maeve Sullivan has been documented as suffering a severe psychotic episode following our father's death. She's been making false reports, fabricating documents, harassing our stepmother. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I am her temporary legal guardian. Any testimony she gives, any document she produces is legally inadmissible. She's not well. She needs help." He turned to me with a face full of warm, fake pity. "It's okay, Maeve. We're going to get you the support you need." The room went absolutely silent. The lead agent looked at the order, then looked at me, then looked at Marguerite, who was somehow already smirking from the back of the SUV, like she'd known this was the play all along. "Sir, this is signed by a Judge Cromwell," the agent said. "It's a real seal." "Of course it's real," Drew said. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. Ma'am, Miss Sullivan, we may need to pause and verify. I felt the whole room tilt. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. The plan wasn't to fight my testimony in court. The plan was to make me legally invisible before the testimony even mattered." They'd had this conservatorship in their back pocket the entire time, ready to spring it the second things went sideways. They were going to medicate me into silence in some private facility in Napa, sell the house out from under me while I was sedated, and split the proceeds. Drew probably had Anders, the personal trainer, on speed dial. For about 8 seconds, I couldn't breathe. Then Honora walked through the front door. "Agent Reyes," she said, "before you act on that conservatorship order, you should probably read Section 9 of the actual will, specifically subsection D." She handed Agent Reyes another document, a stapled packet. Drew's face flickered. "Howard Sullivan," Honora said calmly, "anticipated this exact move. His will includes what we call a capacity protection clause. It states that any beneficiary who attempts to invoke conservatorship, guardianship, or any form of legal incapacity against another named beneficiary must first submit the accused party to a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation conducted by a state-appointed independent examiner. The doctor signing the affidavit must be currently licensed and in good standing. The evaluation must be less than 30 days old." That's Drew started, and Honora kept going. "If the accusing party fails to meet these requirements, they are automatically disinherited and the matter is referred to the district attorney for prosecution." Mr. Sullivan was very thorough. Drew was sweating now, visibly. "My doctor. Your doctor is Trent Hallfield, isn't it?" Honora said. "Doctor of Psychiatry, licensed in California, currently under investigation by the Medical Board for fraudulent disability assessments related to a workers' comp scam in Stockton. His license has been suspended pending review as of 72 hours ago, which means the affidavit you used to obtain that conservatorship order." She nodded at the paper in Agent Reyes' hand. "Was signed by a doctor who is not legally permitted to practice, which makes the order itself void." "And Maeve?" Agent Reyes asked. "Maeve voluntarily submitted to a forensic psychiatric evaluation 11 days ago," Honora said. "Dr. Liana Bauer, court-appointed, chief of psychiatry at UCSF. Her evaluation found Maeve to be of sound mind, high cognitive function, with no symptoms of psychosis, dissociation, or impaired judgment. Her father asked her to do this. He insisted on it, actually, in our consultations before he died. He said one day she'd need a shield." She handed Agent Reyes a second packet. "Here's the eval." Agent Reyes flipped through it, then he looked at Drew. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just lipped. "Sir," he said finally, "did you knowingly use a fraudulent medical affidavit to obtain a court order against your stepsister?" I trusted the doctor. Turn around, hands behind your back." "This is a misunderstanding, sir." "Turn around." The cuffs clicked, and the second click was the one I felt in my chest. The first one had been justice. The second one was peace. "You're not the guardian, Drew," I said. He looked at me with naked hatred. "You're the pawn that thought he was the queen." They walked him out. 6 months later, I was sitting on the back deck of the house in Sausalito, watching the fog roll in over the bay, drinking a cup of Earl Grey out of the china Marguerite had imported from Paris and kept locked in a glass cabinet for special occasions. I cracked the lock the day after she was indicted. The hard money loan dissolved within 48 hours of her arrest. The federal indictment killed it. No lender enforces a contract built on fraud, especially when the collateral was stolen. The probate court fast-tracked the real will, and the house went into my name in less than 90 days. Marguerite's plea deal got her 7 years, federal time, no parole. Drew got 4. Trent Hallfield, the doctor, lost his license permanently and is doing 18 months for fraud. Cal from Reno got 9 years. Turned out he was running about 20 of these scams a year up and down the coast. And the lawyer who'd helped Marguerite forge the original fake will, a man named Garrick Pell, surrendered his bar license and is awaiting sentencing. I didn't sell the house. I could have. $3.2 million, more after the renovation. It would have been the easy thing, but Dad didn't leave me this place to cash out. I'm turning the East Wing into something. By next October, it's going to be called the Howard Sullivan Foundation for Women in Financial Recovery, a transitional home with legal aid offices on the ground floor for women trying to escape abusive marriages and the financial chokeholds those marriages create. 3 lawyers donating pro bono hours a week, a licensed financial counselor on staff, a garden, a music room. I rebuilt the den, fixed the acoustic panels, and I've been slowly, carefully replacing the records, one estate sale at a time. Started with a clean, kind of blue, mono, original Columbia pressing. It cost more than I want to say. Worth every penny. My phone buzzes on the patio table. Federal Correctional Facility, Dublin, California. Collect call. She tries every week. Sometimes it's her. Sometimes she has Drew call from his facility in Lompoc. They want money put on the commissary account. They want to explain. They want me to understand that I overreacted, that families have to forgive, that Dad would have wanted us to work it out. I don't argue. I don't yell. I don't even feel angry anymore, really. I just open my contacts, find her name, and tap block. Then I do the same for Drew. I pour another cup of tea. The fog is beautiful tonight. You know what my grandfather told me once when I was about 10? After I lost a checkers game to a kid at the community center who'd been cheating the whole time, he said, "Maybe, the loudest player at the table is almost never the smartest. The smartest one is the one who's quiet long enough to count the cards in your hand." Marguerite thought I was furniture. Drew thought I was a soft target. They forgot that I grew up in a house where my father taught me every Sunday morning that the spaces between the notes are where the real music lives. The silence is the song. If you've ever been underestimated by someone living under your own roof, if you've ever been called the crazy one for telling the truth, share this with somebody who needs to hear it. There are more of us than they think, and we're patient, and we're listening. And the record is still spinning. I've thought about that morning in the den a lot since it happened. The cracking sound that Miles Davis made when it hit the marble, Drew laughing into his bourbon glass at 11 in the morning, Marguerite's pearl-pink fingernail running down the spine of records my father had spent 40 years collecting, like she was deciding which ones to throw out first. And I've come to believe that what happened to them wasn't bad luck, or karma in some mystical sense. It was math. They added up their own equation. I just stood quietly off to the side and waited for the total to come due. That's the part I want anyone who's ever been the quiet one in the family to understand. People who treat you like furniture aren't just being cruel. They're telling you out loud exactly who they are and exactly what they'll do the moment they think no one's watching. Marguerite told me everything I needed to know about her the second she dropped that first record. Drew told me everything I needed to know about him when he frisbeed Dave Brubeck across the room. The work I had to do after that wasn't deciding whether they were dangerous. They'd already proven that. The work was deciding whether I was going to act out of rage or act with patience and let their choices carry the weight. Rage would have been easier. I won't pretend otherwise. There were nights, after the funeral, when I sat in my car in the driveway and shook because I wanted so badly to walk back in and throw that will in her face and watch her crumble. But rage gives the other person a way out. Rage makes you the villain in their story. Rage means civil court, 5 years, lawyer bills, and a tie at best. Patience meant federal charges, real consequences, and a quiet life on the back deck 6 months later with a cup of tea in a china cup she swore I'd never be classy enough to drink from. There's a difference, I think, between being a doormat and being still. A doormat lets people walk over them because they don't know how to stop it. Still is a choice. Still is what a hunter does. My father taught me, without ever saying it out loud, that decency is not the same as weakness, and that strength doesn't have to announce itself. He spent his last 6 months sliding a will into a record sleeve because he knew the people in his own house, and he loved me enough to leave me a way to win without having to scream for it. The lesson I keep coming back to is this: do the quiet work. Build the documentation. Talk to a real lawyer before you ever talk to the person who's hurting you. Know your own mind well enough that when somebody tries to convince a courtroom you've lost it, the paperwork is already on file proving otherwise. And never confuse forgiveness with access. I forgave Marguerite in my own way, the day I stopped feeling anything when her name showed up on my phone. That's also the day I blocked her. Both things can be true.